When Muin's voice echoed across the mountains, the entire world fell into a deep silence. Everyone stood stunned, staring at the unbelievable scene before them. It wasn't until moments later that they realized Muin had won. With his own strength, he had forcibly pierced through the profound vein and seized back the Elder Council seat that originally belonged to the Qing vein from the most powerful lineage of the Futu ancient clan. How fierce is this? The silence lasted for a while before being broken by a chorus of exclamations. The leaders of the major factions looked at Muin with solemn and wary eyes. Clearly, Muin's display of combat prowess was truly astonishing. After all, he was only at the initial spiritual grade, yet even those at the initial immortal grade had been defeated by his hands. What would happen if he eventually reached the immortal grade? Would he become an invincible force below the saint grade? The Futu ancient clan is really laughable. Such a genius, and yet they label him as a sin child. This is someone destined to ascend to the saint grade. In other places, he would have been cultivated as a pillar of strength by now. These ancient clans pride themselves on their pure bloodlines, but they're so stubborn about it, murmured the powerful figures of the major factions, their tones tinged with schadenfreude. The Futu ancient clan members hearing these words couldn't help but look uncomfortable, yet they couldn't argue. After all, Muin was indeed branded as sin child in the Futu ancient clan. Chen Guang, the leader of the profound vein, had a dark expression, his fists clenched so tightly that they creaked. Today, the reputation of the profound vein had truly been trampled by Muin. Damn brat, ruining our profound vein's plans. Chen Guang was enraged. Their profound vein had spent years planning, and it was on the verge of succeeding. But this Muin, who had appeared out of nowhere, had shattered their hopes. But no matter how angry he was powerless to do anything. The rules of the bloodline tournament were clear. With 4 losses out of 7, the profound vein had no choice but to forfeit their seat. Chen Guang's gaze flickered, and after a moment, he suddenly looked up and said to the first elder, Futu Xian, the profound vein admits defeat and forfeits a seat. However, Muin is a sin child, yet he became the leader of the Qing vein, which is completely against the rules. I propose we convene an elder council meeting to strip him of his position as Qing vein leader. At this moment, Muin was still holding the position of Qing vein leader. If they wanted to act against him, they would be restricted. But once his position was stripped, his status as a sin child would give the Futu ancient clan a legitimate reason to hunt him down. I oppose. Qing Tian immediately shouted, his expression changing upon hearing this. Clearly, he understood Chen Guang's intentions. In favor, Muin, the leader of the Ink vein, thought for a moment before speaking. The profound vein and Ink vein had once joined forces to suppress the Qing vein. Naturally, they didn't want to see Muin disrupt the rules, and the strength he had shown made them wary. It was best to deal with this issue first. Chen Guang and Muin exchanged glances, then turned to the other branch leaders. The 3 branch leaders looked at each other, then, under pressure, nodded in agreement. On the main peak, Futu Xian saw this and furrowed his brow, but after a moment, he nodded and said, since more than 70% of the elders agree, we may convene the council at any time. Hearing this, Chen Guang's lips curled into a cold smile. In the sky, Muin watched this scene with a cold gaze, but surprisingly, he smiled and said with amusement, there's no need for you to make such a fuss and embarrass yourselves. I have no interest in the Qing vein leader position. The only reason I acted was to collect some interest from your profound vein. As he spoke, he flicked his sleeve, and the Qing vein leader token flew towards Qing Tian. Qing Tian caught it, and as he gazed at the token, his expression was complex. Clearly, Muin had no interest in the position, indicating that while he didn't harbor much hatred for the Qing vein, there was certainly some distance. Muin's actions made Chen Guang freeze for a moment, then he sneered inwardly. Fine, in that case, it saved them some trouble. First elder, Muin is a sin child. According to the rules, he should be captured first and then. No need, Muin's somewhat lazy voice interrupted before Chen Guang could finish. I came to the Futu ancient clan today to do one thing, take my mother and leave with her. From now on, we have no further ties with the Futu ancient clan. As soon as these words were spoken, the world fell silent again. The powerful forces present all exchanged looks, their expressions changing slightly. If before, Muin's challenge to the profound vein was considered within the rules, then now, his words were tantamount to challenging the entire Futu ancient clan. This kid is too bold. How dare he say such things? The powerful figures of the various super forces exchanged incredulous glances, their shock growing as they sensed that the real show was only just beginning today. Previously, Muin's assault on the profound vein had only been an appetizer. Now, it was as if the final dagger was being revealed. This Muin would not rest until he had completely turned the Futu ancient clan upside down. However, what baffled them was how Muin could be so confident. With his strength at the initial spiritual grade, if he were to challenge the Futu ancient clan, it would be akin to an ant trying to stop a chariot. He would be seeking his own doom. Even Xian Guang, caught off guard by Muin's unexpected move, was momentarily stunned. But he quickly regained his composure, secretly pleased. This Muin was indeed hot-headed and arrogant, speaking such wild words. This meant the first elder would no longer stand idly by. Looking up, Xian Guang noticed Futu Xian's expression had darkened slightly. Impertinent! Futu Xian's cold shout rang out, his voice carrying such fury that it silenced the heavens and earth, his saint-grade authority unmistakably displayed. Yet, Muin paid no heed to Futu Xian's roar. He lifted his head and met the latter's gaze with unwavering eyes, fearless and unflinching. You Sin child really think that just because you have some ability, you can act with such impunity? What do you take my Futu ancient clan for? Futu Xian bellowed. Qing Yanjing broke the clan rules and is now a criminal. How dare you say you'll take her away? Muin's eyes grew cold as he spoke with a chilling tone. Old fool, I never acknowledged being from your Futu ancient clan, so you can keep that criminal identity for yourself. Muin's disgust for this stubborn old fool was at its peak. If it weren't for him, his family wouldn't have been separated for so many years. So now, he held nothing back in his words, showing him no respect. The members of the Futu ancient clan were stunned. The first elder held an exalted status within the clan, and his authority was immense. Even the branch leaders dared not offend him. Yet, Muin directly called him old fool, an act of blatant disrespect. Arrogant. A wild brat who knows no respect. Futu Xian's face turned green with rage. Seize him. I'll see what qualifications you have to take Qing Yanjing from my Futu ancient clan. Understood. Xian Guang, leader of the profound vein, and Muin, leader of the ink vein, were overjoyed. They leapt to their feet, ready to lead their warriors to capture Muin. Muin is truly reckless. He's angered Futu Xian now, and the Futu ancient clan is about to mobilize. How can he possibly stand against them? The superpower figures watching this scene all shook their heads inwardly. But just as many of the profound vein and ink vein experts surged forward, a burst of laughter suddenly echoed through the sky. Muin is my friend from the boundless fire domain and martial realm. If your Futu ancient clan wants to bully the weak, we won't stand by. At these words, countless gazes turned toward the source of the voice. On a nearby mountain peak stood two figures, one an elderly man with white hair, the other a young man of striking beauty. Upon seeing them, even the elders of the Futu ancient clan couldn't help but change color. The figures who had been rushing toward Muin halted in their tracks. The entire world seemed to vibrate with the shock. That's Chen from the boundless fire domain. He's the master of the Flame Emperor. And that's Lin Diao, the second in command of the martial realm, sworn brother to the martial ancestor. Hiss, no wonder Muin isn't afraid of the Futu ancient clan. He's relying on such powerful backing. Incredible, truly incredible. The boundless fire domain and martial realm are top-tier superpowers in the Great Thousand Worlds. Not just anyone can summon them. Yeah, what kind of influence must Muin have to call on such forces? He really is something else. The experts of the super forces were all stunned. The boundless fire domain and martial realm were both renowned across the Great Thousand Worlds as some of the most powerful forces, not yielding even to the 5 ancient clans. Xian Guang and Muin, leaders of the profound and ink veins, were equally stunned as they watched. They never imagined that the boundless fire domain and martial realm would support Muin, even if it meant offending their Futu ancient clan. Damn it, this Sin child actually reached this level. Even the boundless fire domain and the martial realm are backing him now. The two of them were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they should have dealt with him sooner. Now that this brat had grown so powerful, even they had to be wary of him. They exchanged a glance. With the boundless fire domain and the martial realm intervening, it all depended on whether the first elder would swallow his pride. Their gazes shifted upward toward Futu Xian. His face was somewhat grim, and his eyes, sharp as blades, locked onto Yao Chen and Lin Diao from afar. However, under the gaze of this saint-grade, heavenly supreme, both Yao Chen and Lin Diao remained calm, their expressions unchanged. The boundless fire domain and the martial realm are really willing to risk antagonizing the moat ancient clan for this Sin child? Futu Xian's deep voice rang out slowly, betraying no emotion. Chen smiled slightly and said, Muin and my disciple are friends. I hope the Mo ancient clan does not use its power to suppress others in this matter. Lin Diao also clasped his hands behind his back, his expression cold. Though he didn't speak, his stance was clear. The world fell silent. The powerful forces around them held their breath. If this situation escalated, it could very well turn into a war between the three top-tier superpowers. If that happened, the entire Great Thousand Worlds would shake. In this oppressive silence, Futu Xian's gaze grew deeper. He stared at Chen and Lin Diao for a long moment before his voice broke the stillness. What if I insist on capturing this child today? What will you do then? What will you do then? When Futu Xian's low voice echoed, it felt as if even the wind had frozen. The numerous superpowers present were silent, their heads tingling with nervousness. They clearly hadn't expected that a simple visit to the Mo ancient clan would lead to such a terrifying confrontation. If the Mo ancient clan truly clashed with the boundless fire domain and the martial realm, the entire Great Thousand Worlds would be shaken. Under Futu Xian's intense gaze, Chen and Lin Diao's expressions didn't change much. They exchanged a glance before replying, if the First Elder insists on this, we can only say forgive us and protect Muin. This statement shocked everyone. Was the boundless fire domain and the martial realm really willing to protect Muin at the risk of offending the Mo ancient clan? Shen Guang and Moxion's faces were extremely grim. From their perspective, the situation was nearly unbelievable. After all, the Mo ancient clan was one of the 5 ancient clans of the Great Thousand Worlds, with an immense and terrifying foundation. Yet now, the boundless fire domain and the martial realm were willing to offend them over a mere Muin? Could this Sin child truly have such a draw? At this point, even Shen Guang and Moxion dared not speak further. They could only look to Futu Xian, waiting for his decision. Under the gazes of countless onlookers, Futu Xian's face was emotionless. He lightly tapped the stone chair with his hand, not addressing Chen or Lin Diao. Instead, he turned his gaze to Muin and said softly, I really underestimated your abilities. In just 20 years, you've reached this level, and even formed such connections with the boundless fire domain and the martial realm. He paused here, a cold glint flashing in his eyes before he continued with a chilling voice. But the Mo ancient clan has stood for tens of thousands of years in the Great Thousand Worlds precisely because we follow the rules. So, if you think that just because you've brought the boundless fire domain and the martial realm to back you up, I will simply remove your Sin child status, then you were terribly naive. Having said this, he ignored Muin and looked back at Chen and Lin Diao. Slowly, he said, as for you two wanting to protect him, let the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor speak for you. You two are not qualified. Futu Xian was, after all, a Saint-grade Heavenly Supreme. Though Chen and Lin Diao were both at the late Immortal grade, there was still a vast gap between them and Futu Xian. Thus, Futu Xian paid them no heed. He extended his finger once again, pointing at Muin, and coldly commanded, Shen Guang, Moxion, take action. Lead the elders and capture this Sin child. Yes. Shen Guang and Moxion responded in unison. With a wave of their hands, they led the elders and closed in from all directions, ready to capture Muin. Chen shook his head at this sight, while Lin Diao stepped forward and, with a cold tone, said, in that case, we must experience the First Elder's methods for ourselves. As the voice faded, he clenched his hand, and a glazed bowl appeared in his palm. Etched upon it were 8 ancient runes that seemed to shift between lightning, flames, and ice, flowing like living energy across the bowl's surface. The moment the glazed bowl emerged, the heavens and earth trembled, and an indescribable ripple of power swept outward. Sensing this overwhelming force, even Futu Xian's expression tightened. His gaze locked onto the glazed bowl in Lin Diao's hand as he spoke in a low voice. Legend has it that the martial ancestor forged a peerless sacred artifact using the 8 great ancestral talismans, a Saint-grade treasure known as the 8 Ancestors' Glazed Bowl. If I'm not mistaken, that must be what you're holding. At his words, gasps echoed from all directions. Countless experts stared at the ancient bowl in Lin Diao's hand, their eyes filled with fear and awe. Among all peerless sacred artifacts, those of Saint grade are categorized into spirit, immortal, and saint levels, corresponding to their might. A Saint-grade peerless sacred artifact was a rarity across the Great Thousand Worlds. It was not something even an ordinary Heavenly Supreme could hope to forge, let alone use. Even Saint-grade heavenly supremes would struggle to craft such a treasure. To say this kind of artifact had world-ending power would not be an exaggeration. It is indeed this item. Lin Du replied calmly without elaborating. He exchanged a glance with Chen, and both pressed their fingers to the bowl. Boundless spiritual energy surged forth like a raging flood, pouring into it without pause. Even a late immortal grade heavenly supreme would find it difficult to activate such a treasure alone. Only with Chen and Lin Du working together could it be done. Buzz. As the two channeled their full power, the glazed bowl suddenly emitted a resonating hum. 8-colored radiance burst forth. In the next instant, with a sharp whoosh, the bowl vanished from Lin Du's hand. And then, all eyes turned skyward, as a massive, almost translucent golden bowl descended from above the main peak, so fast it defied time and space. No matter how one tried to escape, once locked on, it could not be evaded. Boom. The glazed bowl engulfed Futu, trapping him within. Even the towering main peak trembled violently. Everyone was stunned. They had assumed Lin Du and Chen had intervened to help Chen, but they never expected them to directly move against Futu. But what good would that do? With Futu's status, it was impossible for him to personally strike at Chen. Capturing Chen didn't require his involvement. Xin Guang, Moin, and the other elders of the Futu ancient clan were more than capable. Even Futu was slightly taken aback. Then he let out a cold snort, remaining seated on his stone chair, eyes half closed. A faint voice echoed from within the bowl. Continue. Hearing this, Xin Guang and Moin didn't hesitate. In a flash, they shot forward, unleashing a wave of overwhelming spiritual power that surged toward Chen like a tidal wave. Hey, Uncle Diao, did you target the wrong guy? From the mountainside, Lin Jing stared, dumbfounded. She quickly tugged on Lin Diao's sleeve and exclaimed, Futu wouldn't dirty his hands. But Chen can't possibly stand against the Futu ancient clan's elders on his own. Beside her, Xiao also looked confused, her beautiful eyes flicking toward Chen and Lin Du. Lin Du, jolted by Lin Jing's insistent shaking, finally cracked a helpless smile. All right, stop shaking. This wasn't our idea. It was Chen's plan. He told us to just trap Futu. He can handle the rest on his own. Chen nodded in agreement, adding with a smile, that's right. Even I'm curious where Chen gets the confidence to take on all these heavenly supreme elders from the Futu ancient clan by himself. Hearing that, Lin Jing and Xiao exchanged uncertain looks. They knew Chen was powerful, but was he really strong enough to handle this alone? Still, Chen wasn't the kind of person to make reckless promises. If he insisted, then he must have something planned. Well, let's wait and see. But if things go south, you two better step in, Lin Jing said hesitantly. Lin Du nodded. Don't worry. Since your father entrusted us with this, we'll make sure he's safe. While Lin Jing and the others were talking, the other major forces in this world were also puzzled. They looked at the heavenly net that was closing in on Chen, shaking their heads secretly. In such a situation, not to mention that Chen was only in the early spiritual grade, even if he had reached the immortal grade at this moment, he would still be unable to resist the countless elders of the Futu ancient clan. It seems that the Boundless Fire Domain and the Martial Realm don't want to start a war with Chen and the Futu ancient clan, so they only intervened to trap Futu but let the other elders go unchallenged. Some found reasons for this, and after they were spoken, they did make sense. After all, when comparing Chen to the Futu ancient clan, the priority was obvious to anyone. Elder Qing Tian, Elder Qing Xian, and the others, however, were pale. Things had escalated to this point, and the first elder had already become angry. Even if their Qing bloodline wanted to protect Chen, it would be very difficult. Elder Qing Xian, we should also find an opportunity to strike and disrupt the situation. It's best to give Chen a chance to escape. Qing Tian gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice to Elder Qing Xian. If Chen was captured here, it was feared that Qing Yinjing would really sever ties with their Qing bloodline in the future. Elder Qing Xian nodded seriously when she heard this. Chen, why don't you just surrender? With your strength, do you really think you can stand against my Futu ancient clan? As many forces sighed, the heavenly net was already formed. The 10 or so heavenly supremes from the profound vein and ink vein had sealed the entire space. Xuanguang and Moin watched Chen with mocking smiles, as if they were looking at prey trapped in a trap. Chen, you better not fool yourself. Surrender quietly, or when we make our move, if we can't control our strength and end up crippling you, it will be a wasted opportunity for this ninefold divine vein. Moxin said with an indifferent tone. However, to their words, Muin, who was in the heavenly net, remained unshaken. His expression was calm, even as his eyes slightly closed, standing with his hands behind his back, the wind causing his robes to flutter. Stubborn and ignorant. Attack. After waiting for a dozen breaths, seeing Muin remain silent, Xuanguang sneered coldly and waved his sleeve. Whoosh. Behind them, more than a dozen figures shot out at once. Vast spiritual energy like a galactic torrent surged toward Muin, overwhelming him with a barrage of attacks. Even an immortal-grade Heavenly Supreme would be horrified by such a display. With such an onslaught, Muin's strength would surely be severely injured in an instant. In the vast space, many onlookers shook their heads in regret. This rare ninefold divine vein, would it really fall here today? However, just at this moment, Muin's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. He looked at the Futu ancient clan elders coming at him, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. You separated me from my mother and son for decades. Today, I, Muin, will settle this debt with you. As the last word fell, countless beams of light gathered in his pupils, forming mystical spiritual seals as numerous as the stars. Boom. At the same time, in the infinite sky above the floating pagoda realm, it seemed that the sun, moon, and stars appeared, quickly transforming into a vast array that enveloped the entire space. When the sun, moon, and stars appeared high in the sky, all the powerful beings in the floating pagoda realm noticed it. Especially Xuanguang and the others, who immediately looked up. When they saw the array, even their usually steady minds were instantly shaken, their scalp tingling with terror. Because the array that had suddenly appeared was none other than their Futu ancient clan's clan protection array. Boom. High in the distant sky, it was as if the sun, moon, and stars were descending. A vast, unimaginable spiritual array fell from the heavens, bringing with it a mighty heavenly power that covered the world. This caused countless powerful beings to recoil in fear. The experts from the many major forces looked on in horror at the towering array in the sky. Under such a spiritual formation, even these heavenly supremes felt a sense of dread. Xuanguang and Moxin's expressions both changed drastically, and sharp, fearful voices rang out in unison. Clan protection array? They were terrified, for they were all too familiar with this array. It was the Futu ancient clan's clan protection array, the product of countless ancestors' hard work, its power enough to protect the entire Futu ancient clan. Even if a saint-grade heavenly supreme were to come, they wouldn't be able to break it. However, now, the clan protection array, which was one of the shields of the Futu ancient clan, had automatically descended without being activated by them. How could this not leave them horrified? Who triggered the clan protection array? Xinguang and Imotong's gazes quickly fell on Muin, filled with disbelief. At this moment, Muin had already formed an enigmatic connection with the array hovering high in the sky. How was this possible? Xinguang and Imotong were stunned, unable to understand how Muin could control their Futu ancient clan's clan protection array. This. Qing Tian and the others from the Qing bloodline were also shocked. Even Qin Xian's expression changed. It was she who had placed Muin's blood jade token into the clan protection array earlier, but she never imagined that Muin could use it to control the array. I see now. At this moment, Yao Chen clapped his hands and laughed softly, finally understanding where Muin's confidence came from. He had secretly taken control of the Futu ancient clan's clan protection array. With this array, unless a saint-grade heavenly supreme intervened, no one would be able to stop Muin. Not bad. At such a young age, he plans ahead, unknowingly keeping such a powerful trump card in hand. Lin Diao also couldn't help but praise. Lin Jing widened her bright eyes and smiled, using the Futu ancient clan's own clan protection array to deal with the clan's people. Muin's move is truly brilliant. Xiao Xiao nodded lightly. Muin had come to the Futu ancient clan to avenge his mother, and this tactic was indeed satisfying. Boom. While everyone marveled, Muin, standing high in the sky, swept his cold eyes across the scene, forming hand seals. Instantly, the immense array in the sky began to operate. Dozens of towering beams of spiritual light descended. Boom. Boom. These beams of light shattered the powerful attacks launched by the elders of the Xian and Ink bloodlines. The array's overwhelming might was no exaggeration. Seeing their attacks easily crushed, the two bloodline elders couldn't help but change color, their hearts filled with the urge to retreat. Against Muin, who controlled the clan protection array, they knew they had no chance of winning. Trying to leave? Muin's cold voice pierced through their thoughts. He sneered. These old fools had been so arrogant before. thinking they had him in their grasp. Now that they were attacking, they wanted to leave so easily? With that thought, Muin formed new seals, linking to the vast array. Immediately, endless spiritual light gathered within the array. There was a deafening roar as over a dozen towering spiritual power mountains emerged within the array. These mountains glittered like treasure mountains, weighing as much as billions of pounds. When they appeared, even the space could not bear their weight, warping and collapsing under the pressure. Boom! Muin swung his sleeve, and the treasure-like mountains descended from the sky, smashing through space as they charged towards the elders of the Chen and Ink bloodlines. Seeing this, the elders were horrified. They could clearly sense the terrifying power radiating from the gemstone-like mountains. With the power of the clan protection array, Muin was practically a terror to behold. The attacks he unleashed with a mere wave of his hand even made the Saint-grade Heavenly Supreme tremble in fear. Retreat quickly! The elders, scared out of their wits, dared not resist. They sped off at their utmost speed, disappearing in a blink of an eye, several hundred miles away in just a few breaths. Boom! However, no matter how fast they tried to retreat, the gemstone mountains followed them through space, relentlessly crashing down with deafening sounds, directly smashing them to the ground, trapping them beneath the heavy weight of the mountains. Countless experts stood dumbfounded, watching as the gemstone mountains rose from the earth, each one pressing down on an elder of the Futu ancient clan. Hiss! All the powerful figures in the surroundings couldn't help but gasp in shock. Who would have thought that the many elders, who had been showing off and treating Muin as prey just moments ago, would now be completely subdued without any ability to resist? The entire Futu ancient clan fell into a deathly silence. Xin Luo, Moxin, and the others stood frozen, dumbfounded. They had initially thought that Muin would not survive this crisis, but who could have predicted that, with a swift motion, he would take control of the clan protection array and suppress the esteemed elders of the Futu ancient clan as if they were mere dead dogs, leaving them unable to move. Xin Guang and Imotong, in particular, were grim expressions. Today, both the profound Vein and Ink lineage had lost all face. With their two strongest factions joining forces, not only had they failed to capture a single Muin, but instead, he had used the array to suppress all the elders one by one. Muin, at a time like this, you still dare to resist? Do you really think the Futu ancient clan can't deal with you? Xin Guang shouted angrily. However, in response to his furious outburst, Muin merely gave him a cold glance. Then, with a swift gesture, he formed a seal with his hands, causing the grand array to activate once more. The array transformed into a colossal gemstone hand that descended from the sky, mercilessly slamming down at Xin Guang. As the hand descended, the very space around them shattered. The mountain ranges below were flattened, sinking into a bottomless abyss. Brat, you're too arrogant! Xin Guang bellowed, his body trembling as he released a burst of spiritual light. From behind him, a massive figure materialized, its spiritual energy surging like a trembling galaxy. It was Xin Guang's supreme Dharma form. The colossal figure's massive hand collided with the gemstone hand in midair. Boom! The entire world seemed to echo with the sound of thunder, a deafening crash that shook the heavens. To the shock of many, the massive supreme Dharma form was struck down into the sky, causing the ground beneath to crack open. Standing on the shoulder of the supreme Dharma form, Xin Guang's face turned ashen. Facing Muin, who controlled the clan protection array, he had completely fallen to the disadvantage. Imotong, let's act together. Controlling the clan protection array is draining. This kid can't sustain it for much longer. At this point, Xin Guang no longer cared for his pride. He had to join forces with Imotong to deal with Muin. Understood. Imotong replied decisively. At this moment, Muin, relying on the power of the clan protection array, would be difficult to defeat alone. Boom. Boom. Two massive supreme Dharma forms appeared in the sky. The two peak experts at the late immortal grade unleashed their terrifying power, sending waves of destructive attacks surging toward Muin. However, facing their combined assault, Muin remained calm and unafraid. With a cold laugh, he changed his seal. The array activated again, and one gemstone hand after another reached out from it, like the hands of gods, descending from the heavens to strike at the two of them. Every attack they sent forth was obliterated by these gemstone hands. Boom. Boom. The heavens shook with the terrifying battle. Every clash sent chills down the onlookers' spines. Yet, as time passed, it became clear to all that Xin Guang and Imotong were slowly falling into a losing position. The clan protection array of the Futu ancient clan was just too powerful. After all, it was designed to withstand great calamities, even able to resist a heavenly supreme of saint grade. Although Muin could not fully unleash its power, it was more than enough to contend with two late-stage immortal grade experts. It seems that Xin Guang and Imotong are about to be suppressed, Lin Jing observed with a smile. Such a prodigy, yet they rejected him at the door. The Futu ancient clan has truly become outdated to the extreme. No wonder they're now at the bottom of the 5 ancient clans. Xiao Xiao shook her head, lamenting. Lin Diu and Yao Chen nodded, both somewhat surprised. Who could have imagined that Muin would turn the tables on the Futu ancient clan with such an unexpected move? At this moment, Muin, high in the sky, noticed that Xin Guang and Imotong were beginning to weaken. With a cold smile, he changed his seal once more, summoning 2 towering gemstone peaks that descended from the sky. These 2 peaks blotted out the sun, their power far more terrifying than the gemstone mountains that had suppressed the other elders. Xin Guang and Imotong's faces turned pale. They hurriedly pushed their supreme Dharma forms to their limits, raising their hands to block the massive gemstone peaks. Boom. However, they had underestimated the power of the clan protection array. As soon as the peaks collided with the supreme Dharma forms, the latter exploded into pieces. Xin Guang and Imotong spat out blood, their faces pale with shock and horror in their eyes. Boom. Before they could even attempt to flee, the gemstone mountain peaks shattered the space around them, roaring downwards and violently pressing down on their bodies, forcing them deep into the earth. Boom. Boom. The ground trembled as 2 towering gemstone mountain peaks stood erect. Beneath them, Xin Guang and Imotong's faces turned ashen, with half of their bodies crushed beneath the immense weight, blood spurting out uncontrollably. The turbulent spiritual energy fluctuations gradually subsided, but the world remained eerily silent. Everyone stood in shock, staring wide-eyed at the scene, their gazes fixed on the young figure standing with his hands behind his back in the sky above. That figure was as straight as a spear, radiating an aura of unyielding sharpness. All the experts of the Futu ancient clan swallowed nervously, their faces filled with dread. Even Qing Tian, Qing Xian, and others were visibly shaken, clearly stunned by Muin's remarkable display of power. My God, this freak, someone muttered under their breath. Who could have imagined that the young man before them would single-handedly suppress all the elders of the Xian and Imo bloodlines? This was truly a one-man war against an entire clan. However, Muin paid no mind to the countless shocked gazes. His eyes, sharp as blades, locked onto Futu Xian in the glazed bowl, his voice cold and low as it rang out. Futu Xian, will you let them go today, or not? In the vast expanse of the world, only Muin's cold voice echoed, while everyone else remained in stunned silence. Clearly overwhelmed by the astounding feat of Muin single-handedly suppressing all the elders of the Xian and Imo bloodlines of the Futu ancient clan. None of them had ever imagined that a spirit-grade heavenly supreme could force the mighty Futu ancient clan into such a state. Everyone understood that from this day on, Muin's name would echo throughout the entire Great Thousand Worlds. In the silence, the eyes of those present slowly shifted toward the direction of Futu Xian. There, the glazed bowl shimmered with light, crackling with thunder, darkness, and flames, all flashing in an endless display of power. Within it sat Futu Xian, his aging face as cold and iron-like as ever. His piercing gaze was fixed on Muin, exuding an oppressive aura that made the heart tremble. Even sitting still, the pressure emanating from a saint-grade heavenly supreme was enough to make any ordinary heavenly supreme feel it. I never expected you, a mere spirit-grade heavenly supreme, to come this far. Truly, you are your mother's son, Qing Yinjing's child, Futu Xian's voice rumbled. However, as I've told you before, rules are rules. They cannot be shaken. As long as I remain the Grand Elder of the Futu ancient clan, I will never release your mother. And you will always remain a son child in the Futu ancient clan. In Futu Xian's eyes, a terrifying glint seemed to gather as he slowly rose to his feet. In that instant, he resembled a towering mountain, and the entire world seemed to be enveloped in a terrifying aura. Originally, for Qing Yinjing's sake, I did not wish to make things difficult for you. But since you, a son child, dared to run wild in my Futu ancient clan, today, I will not spare you. Boom. As Futu Xian's deep voice fell, the heavens and earth seemed to shake. Thunder roared, and the sky seemed to darken as if a natural disaster had arrived, the overwhelming force of his presence filling the world. The fury of a saint grade could obliterate everything. The many heavenly supremes present felt the overwhelming pressure, their faces grave and filled with awe. A saint grade was the pinnacle of the Great Thousand Worlds, and clearly. When a peak expert like Futu revealed his power, it was earth-shattering. Even Yao Chen and Lin Diao's faces tightened, their expressions heavy. Though Futu wasn't as strong as Xiao Yin or Lin Dong, he was still a legitimate saint-grade heavenly supreme, not someone to be underestimated. Buzz. Suddenly, the glazed bowl began to tremble slightly. The thunder, flames, and ice that coiled around it roared to life, transforming into 9 massive dragons that circled the bowl, roaring angrily at Futu inside. He's about to make a move. Yao Chen and Lin Diao's eyes narrowed. They immediately channeled immense spiritual power into the glazed bowl. If martial ancestor were here, I might truly be trapped. But you two are only at the late immortal grade. How can you hope to unleash the full power of this saint-grade peerless sacred artifact? Futu cold laughter echoed from within the glazed bowl. His robes billowed, making a rustling sound, and with a light twist of his hands, he summoned an overwhelming surge of spiritual light, endless and vast, exploding from his palms like the very sun and moon themselves. Boom. In the next moment, an endless surge of spiritual light erupted from the palm of Futu, transforming into a massive black and white halo above him. The black and white colors intertwined, emanating a destructive force. With a loud shout, Futu sent the black and white halo soaring into the sky, directly charging toward the glazed bowl. Roar. At that moment, the 8 fire-breathing dragons, each made of flames, ice, black fire, and thunder, on the glazed bowl sensed the threat. They all opened their mouths, shooting 8 beams of spiritual power and different attributes, twisting space as they collided heavily with the black and white halo. Boom, boom, boom. The moment of contact sent shockwaves through the air, causing the surrounding space to collapse in fragments, as if creating a black hole vortex. The towering main peak trembled under the force of the impact, and massive rocks tumbled down. However, no matter how the 8 dragons unleashed their attacks, once they made contact with the black and white halo, they were shredded to pieces. Get out of my way. At the same time, Futu cold voice rang out once more. The black and white halo condensed into a beam of light, shooting upwards before crashing heavily into the glazed bowl. Clang. A deafening sound reverberated through the air. Some weaker individuals on nearby peaks immediately spat blood and collapsed to the ground. Only those with stronger cultivation could stabilize themselves and disperse the shockwave. All eyes were fixed on the glazed bowl, and soon, they saw it shaking violently. It was as if an unimaginable force had struck it. With a loud bang, it was sent flying into the air. As the glazed bowl flew off, Futu turned into a streak of light, following close behind. Lin Diao and Yao Chen, seeing this, furrowed their brows, preparing to activate the 8 ancestors' glazed bowl once more. Senior, there's no need to interfere, a voice suddenly stopped them. It was Muin, who had just spoken. Let me handle this. Looking at the current situation, even with the power of the glazed bowl, Lin Diao and Yao Chen could not stand up to Futu. If they forced the issue, they would only risk injury, something Muin didn't want to see. Upon hearing Muin's words, Lin Diao and Yao Chen exchanged a glance, understanding his intent. After a brief pause, they both nodded. Muin, my friend, if things go wrong, don't hesitate to retreat. If anyone dares to take advantage of their position and bully the young, my disciple might have to step in, Yao Chen said slowly. I'm of the same mind, Lin Diao added coldly. Their words sent ripples through the crowd of powerful forces present. Even the experts of the Futu ancient clan narrowed their eyes. If they truly provoked the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor today, even the Futu ancient clan might feel an overwhelming pressure. In the sky, Futu expression remained indifferent, though his eyes flickered slightly. He had heard the implicit threat in Yao Chen and Lin Diao's words, but his stubborn and hard-headed nature made him unfazed. He sneered and said, I've long heard of the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor's reputation, but today, the Futu ancient clan must deal with this sin child. No one can interfere. With that, his sharp gaze fixed on Muin. If you think controlling the clan protection array grants you the right to fight me, you're gravely mistaken. Muin's face remained cold, ignoring his words. He formed a hand seal, and immediately, the towering array above began to operate. Thousands of vast beams of spiritual light shot down, bombarding Futu. You won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Today, I'll grant you that lesson. Futu roared in fury. He twisted his hands, summoning another huge black and white halo. The halo soared into the sky, allowing the spiritual light beams to crash into it, but all were shredded by its unstoppable force. Chen's eyes narrowed. This Saint-grade expert was indeed terrifyingly powerful. Even the earlier attacks from Xin Guang and Mo Tong had left them in a desperate state, but now, they couldn't even touch Futu. Whoosh! The black and white halo continued to shred the spiritual power beams as it shot toward Chen at an astonishing speed. The swirling black and white colors seemed capable of tearing apart everything in their path. Chen's eyes flickered. Instead of recklessly clashing head-on with the black and white light wheel, he moved swiftly, soaring into the air and dodging into the towering protective formation. He then activated the formation, causing a torrent of spiritual energy to roar down like whips, crashing into the black and white light wheel. Boom! In an instant, the heavens and earth rumbled with thunder, and the terrifying shockwaves flattened the mountains below, reducing them to rubble. However, it was clear to anyone watching that the offensive power of the protective formation was gradually weakening, as the black and white light will began to draw closer to the formation. Chen is still only a spirit-grade heavenly supreme. Even with the help of the protective formation, he can't match Futu. Some of the powerful figures sighed as they observed. The power of this protective formation is indeed extraordinary, but Chen isn't able to fully activate it. Otherwise, Futu wouldn't be able to do anything to him. But at this rate, it won't last much longer. The crowd of strong figures whispered among themselves, all realizing Chen's impending defeat. Amidst the cacophony, Chen remained calm. Hidden within the formation, his gaze flickered, and then he slightly narrowed his eyes. From the very beginning, he knew that even with the help of the protective formation, he wasn't a match for Futu. After all, the might of a Saint-grade expert was beyond imagination, and no external force could counter it. Therefore, his control over the protective formation was not to counter Futu, but for another purpose. He exhaled a breath of white air and then extended his senses, which spread through the protective formation. This formation enveloped the entire floating pagoda realm and could extend to any part of the Futu ancient clan. Within the formation, certain areas felt extremely familiar to him. He knew these places were arranged by his mother. Following these paths, he would find the place he was searching for. Boom! The external shockwaves were completely blocked by Chen. His senses expanded throughout every corner of the Futu ancient clan, and finally, at a certain moment, he detected a familiar fluctuation. His senses then pierced through a section of space, and there, he saw an ancient, towering pagoda. He had seen this pagoda before, back when he had ascended to the Saint-grade floating pagoda. As his senses approached the ancient pagoda, they were not rejected, as they were guided by the protective formation, allowing him to easily enter. Once inside the ancient pagoda, Chen's senses stopped at a certain point. His body trembled slightly, for within this place, he could feel the blood-related aura that tied him to another. His senses seemed to whisper with trembling murmurs. "Mother, your child has come to bring you home." In a certain space, a gentle woman in a white dress sat cross-legged. At this moment, she suddenly lifted her face and looked toward a void. Tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. She gently wiped the tears from her cheek, smiled towards the void, and then the gentle aura surrounding her slowly faded. In its place, a cold, protective aura began to manifest. Her delicate body shuddered, and then gradually began to dissipate. A soft voice echoed through the void. "My child, from now on, no one will ever bully you again."